Hey y'all, it's Gabby. Welcome back to my channel. This video is going to be a little bit different than my last video. I'm actually going to be talking about a video that Wallace released about a year ago now, which is about Dr. Phil's comments regarding BTS's Jimin and the fan reactions surrounding those comments. I just want to preface by saying, I like D'Angelo's content. I'm subscribed to all 3 of his channels, and I think he does a really good job. He seems like a genuine person, and I can tell that he puts a lot of research and effort and time into making quality content. So I can't say that I dislike D'Angelo, and I definitely don't want to cancel him or make it seem like he's not good at all at what he does. But I do think he has some weak points, and that one of those weak points is K-pop. He's made 3 videos surrounding K-pop and the K-pop industry. One that was good, which was a review of BTS's album Map of the Soul 7. I thought he did a really great review. He made sure to look at the English translation of the lyrics, understand the themes and concepts developed throughout the album, differentiate the different members within each of the songs vocally, which even for me, as somebody who's been a fan of BTS since 2016, so over 4 years now, that can even be hard for me to do, so kudos for him for that. I didn't agree with every single one of his opinions there, but I think he did a really great job in giving the album the care that it deserved. But he made then 2 other videos about K-pop industry and K-pop community, both of which were filled with misconceptions, misunderstandings, and sometimes even just flat out falsehoods. And I didn't really like that at all. I think especially somebody who's such a big content creator and thus somebody that a lot of people are going to be paying attention to, he needs to be paying more attention to the kind of narratives that he's setting, and thus sometimes the kinds of negative narratives that he could be setting about a lot of these subjects. And already people don't like K-pop fans. Already people have these really negative ideas about K-pop, about the K-pop industry, about K-pop artists and K-pop fans. So I really didn't like that he, of all people, somebody that I trusted to do their research and to really put a lot of care and effort into understanding the subject that they were covering, really dropped the ball on those 2 videos. Luckily, BB Gang already did a reaction to his most recent video actually, on K-pop stans are over party. He did a really great job tackling why some of what D'Angelo said was wrong, and also just giving a different perspective of K-pop fans, making sure to address the fact that, they're not monolithic, they're people just like anybody else, and being a K-pop fan is not their entire identity. So I highly recommend that you check that out, and I will link it down below in the description. But yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna react to the other K-pop video that he did that I hadn't really seen any commentary about, surprisingly, especially since there were definitely a good number of K-pop fans that did not like this video.
Fans upset after Dr. Phil calls BTS's Jimin manufactured. Now, I got so many people asking me to do this after I mentioned it in passing yesterday. It's almost like y'all want me to get in trouble, right? It's like you want K-pop Twitter to be mad at me, right?
Not all K-pop fans listen to BTS. Just wanted to point that out there. Just because you're a fan of some artists within a genre, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be fans of every single artist within that genre. I'm a fan of rock and roll music, but I don't like Elvis Presley, which is somebody that you would, I guess, because he's a really big artist within the genre, that you would assume that people who like some artists within the genre would also be a fan of. And that's just not true. Any genre is just as complex as any fan that's a fan of the genre and fan of artists within it. So I don't really think it's helpful to make this essentializing claim that all K-pop fans somehow listen to BTS and are also going to be coming at you for this video, because that's just not really true. If anyone's going to be coming at you, it's going to be people that are fans of BTS, and that's going to be BTS Army. But I just want also, for people who don't really know K-pop outside of the narrative that Western media gives you, we're not irrational people. We're not just going to be coming at you for no reason, usually. I mean, every group's got some messes. But most of the time, people are going to give you thoughtful responses and critique. And if you decide to react negatively to that, that's not really on us. But yeah, people are going to react negatively to what you're saying if you say something that is negative in it that isn't really helpful or is even harmful to the community. We're not just going to react to you because you said something that was just a different opinion. But yeah, I just kind of want to put that out there. If I'm going to be addressing some big misconceptions, I might as well do the smaller ones too, because I do think they compare.
So as unqualified as Dr. Phil is to diagnose or help anybody because he obviously doesn't have people's best interest at heart, he still tried to give this man some good advice. But that good advice wound up being the hot water he landed himself in. So he said this.
You feel like you need to be somebody else, and you have to know that the somebody else that you're wanting to be is not really who that person appears to be. That's a manufactured, marketed image.
So like, where's the lie? Like, how is that wrong, mean, inaccurate? That's just true.
Where is your evidence to say that this is true? How do you know that what Jimin presents is not by his own accord? How do you know that who he is not represented by his persona? Or at least it is in part, right? Just because he is a celebrity and has a persona as a performer, that doesn't mean that he isn't authentic or that everything that he presents or is somehow manufactured in a marketed image. That's a pretty bold thing to say about somebody that you do not know, especially about someone like Jimin, who is someone that you're not really paying attention to because you have said in the past that you're not a fan of BTS and you don't like their music. And two, given the fact that Jimin releases hours of content, including, live streams where he's talking to fans and answering the questions and just talking about his day, and songs that he's written himself about his own inner struggles, about where he is in his life, and just sad. So to assume that everything he does is contrived and marketed makes it seem like no matter how honest he is or what he wears or what he says, it's always to sell a product. And I think it's pretty insulting to say, especially when, you can say this about every single celebrity, but I only hear it about artists that are within the K-pop industry. And I'll talk more about how I know that and just like why that's problematic, but yeah.
The person who posted that said, since OP deleted the tweet, here's Dr. Phil calling Jimin manufactured and a marketed image. It was seriously uncalled for and is feeding into stereotypes about K-pop idols. First of all, I don't understand how that's uncalled for when, I feel like this Ollie London guy needs to probably realize that you're devoting your whole life into transforming yourself into this other person, but deep down you don't really know who that person is. He's not talking about Jimin's face per se. He's talking about Jimin as a concept, as a brand, as an entertainer. That's what Ollie London has paid all this money to look like. He hasn't paid money to look like Jimin in his most natural state.
Okay, so I agree with Dr. Phil in that you shouldn't be trying to be somebody that you don't know. You should be comfortable being who you are as a person. Because you can only be a second-rate Jimin, but you can be a first-rate Ollie London. And I definitely agree with that concept. I don't really think that we should be modifying our bodies to be somebody that we're not. I don't think body modification is at all bad, inherently. I think if you want to do that and you want to spend the money on it, you go and do that. I'm not going to be the one to stop. But obviously, I do agree with Dr. Phil and D'Angelo in the sense that, there's a way that it can be problematic and it can be harmful for you and your self-esteem. However, Dr. Phil did not need to say that Jimin is a manufactured marketed image just to say that you don't really know who Jimin is and thus you shouldn't want to be someone that you don't know. Even though Jimin puts out a lot of content about himself along with BTS, we can never fully know him until we personally interact with him and become friends with him. So I agree with that. But what is the point of implying that Jimin and what he represents and presents out to the world is contrived? What is the point of saying that Jimin is not really who he says he is and is putting on an act, a persona? Often that what you're implying is what his company wants him to do in order to sell a product. That isn't really relevant to the crux of the argument that you should not try to be someone that you don't fully know and thus very much so is not representative of who you are as a person. It doesn't really matter whether or not that person is putting on an act or is contriving a personality. So yeah, that tweet is right. OP is right. It was uncalled for and it was not necessary to get his point across. And it does fall into stereotypes about K-pop idols that I have seen constantly. But I will talk more about that later.
This one has to be satire. This has to be ironic. It says, I can't believe Dr. Phil really just said Jimin is a manufactured marketed image. He's basically saying that Jimin's image is created as per the requirements of being an idol, not his real self. No, you've got to be trolling.
Yeah, again, this Twitter user is right. Just because Jimin is part of a K-pop group, that does not mean that he experiences the exact same treatment that other K-pop artists do at other labels. For some background, BTS is under Bighit Entertainment, and when they started, they were a really small label on the verge of bankruptcy. So by the time that they signed on BTS, they were on their last leg. This was their last chance to debut an artist that would obviously make them a lot of money, but also put them on the map to be taken more seriously and to hopefully sign other artists and to become bigger and thus be more a competitive entertainment label within the K-pop industry. And obviously, given the fact that BTS is as big as they are, it worked out. Good for them. Obviously, I'm glad that they exist. But I think a big part of why BTS is so successful and also why Bighit Entertainment is different than some of these other entertainment labels is that BTS was given a lot of freedom. They wrote their own lyrics. They helped produce a lot of their music. They set the tone and the themes and the concepts for each of their albums. They helped contribute to the music videos. So they played a pretty heavy role in the music that is out there, and they made sure that that music was personal to them. And it talked about some pretty heavy topics like mental illness, the Korean educational system, income inequality, capitalism, and those are pretty risky things to be talking about, especially when a lot of the K-pop industry very much so kind of promoted, talking about relationships and love and friendship and having fun. There's not a lot of music out there within the industry that's talking about very personal and emotional things, but two, very much so songs that are criticizing the government. That's just a way for you to get censored, my friend. So they have some big cojones putting out music like that. So they're very much so different from these other labels in the kind of content that they released. They were also different in the fact that BTS did not mandate that any of their trainees within their company would have to pay the label back for all of these singing lessons, dance lessons, housing, etc. A lot of K-pop labels, what they'll do is that they will, once you make it big, once you start making money for the company through merchandising, concerts, etc., they will make you pay back that money until you've paid off your debt for all of the time that they've trained you, which could amount to multiple years. So that's a lot of money that you have to make back. So even if you're a really successful K-pop group, you may not be able to make any money for yourself off of that. So I'm really glad that Bighit, very much so, it does not fall into the categorization of these other entertainment labels. And I hope it doesn't need to be said, but I think it's very harmful and unethical to basically make slaves out of the trainees in your company. I do not think that they should be obligated to just pay all this money back for you to train them to be an employee for your company. I think that's really gross, and that is an aspect of capitalism that disgusts me. I mean, aside from everything else about capitalism, well, that's just one of the everything that is bad about capitalism. So TLDR, BTS, out of all of the groups, is not going to be playing by the standard rules of the K-pop industry, and they are one of the few groups that have consistent control over the music and thus make music that is really personal and honest. Furthermore, the members of the groups are probably going to be the least likely to feel stifled and thus forced into a strict model of how to behave, what to look like, how to speak, etc., considering the fact that the label has given them so much freedom, and they also aren't beholden to the label like some other artists are in other entertainment labels, like I was already talking about. Thus, picking Jimin out of all of these different groups to somehow be manufactured is very strange. Also, just to kind of mention, a lot of what D'Angelo kind of implies with the K-pop industry is very much so a symptom of Western media focusing on the worst parts of the K-pop industry that are perpetuated by the three main entertainment labels, which are SM Entertainment, YG Entertainment, and JYP Entertainment. So I just don't appreciate the fact that the narrative of these three labels out of all these different labels are setting the narrative for how you're viewing every single thing and every single person within K-pop, even though with BTS and Bighit, that very much so just doesn't apply. And so already we're seeing that D'Angelo isn't doing the research to kind of understand why some of these Twitter users are saying what they're saying, because I've done my research and I've looked at videos talking about this, so I know what they're saying. There is elements of truth to what they're saying, but he didn't even bother to look into what they're saying and just assume that they were wrong, which they aren't. So yeah.
There's no Jimin hate from Dr. Phil's statement. Manufactured marketed image is just true. Unfortunately, even YouTubers are manufactured marketed images. Now, I would like to think that what I put forward on camera is a pretty decent reflection of how I am as a person, but there's still no way for me to be my most authentic self while having in the back of my mind that a lot of people are going to be watching me.
Yeah, sure. Like, I don't think Dr. Phil hates Jimin or is trying to send hate his way. But since when is being a manufactured marketed image at all a neutral descriptor, let alone a positive one? I already talked about this a little bit. But I just kind of find it odd that D'Angelo Wallace is trying to make it seem that it is perfectly okay to be a manufactured marketed image and that all YouTubers and celebrities have that, but then goes on to say that he hopes he presents his authentic self on YouTube. And then also forgetting the fact that YouTube as a platform is all about authenticity and being yourself. That's the same thing for musicians. When has a musician ever prided themselves on being manufactured? Last time I checked, we praised artists for being honest and authentic and relatable. Hence why so many artists like Billie Eilish, Kendrick Lamar, or even BTS for that matter, are so popular. To say that something is manufactured is not to say that it is a persona. Those are not equivalent statements. It is to say that the content and the art, or the person, like with Jimin, is fake. That the content has no heart behind it or emotions, and that the person that we see is just a shell. And that everything that we put on that is placed onto them. The point of art and being online is to be yourself, is to connect with other people. Hence why parasocial relationships become a problem in the first place. We connect so much with people who we believe to be like us. Thus, when that illusion can be shattered with some new information that we get from people that very much so challenges that concept that we've created of them, given the content that we've consumed, that can seem like a betrayal. It can seem as if they aren't who they say they are, which, can be partially because of the fact that we have not really trained ourselves to really take in all the information that we consume and also contextualize it. But I also do think it's a kind of a symptom of just, I don't really think we allow people to be fully authentic online, and so people kind of have to be a certain way. That gets into a whole other conversation. The point is, we want people in our lives who create the art that we consume to be like us. There's a kind of kindred spirit element to that, and we want to be able to connect with people and feel seen and feel understood. So when you make the accusation that people are manufactured, you now are saying that these people don't understand us and they aren't like us at all. And I don't really understand where you have any evidence for that. That's just kind of where I'm confused over all of this. Because if you actually take what BTS is doing at face value and don't assume that they're just doing it for marketing, you don't assume that for other artists, then you really wouldn't be saying what you're saying.
One time I was on Twitter and I saw that BTS was trending, and I looked to see why. I always think one of them is dead whenever that happens. But no, apparently Jimin dyed his hair a certain color, and then he was trending on Twitter because so many people were talking about it. If that does not tell you that he's a manufactured marketed image, I don't know what's... This man's hair is manufactured and marketed. So even if there's no plastic surgery and he's just fresh-faced, he's still doing the makeup, he's still doing the hair, he's still dressing a certain way, presenting himself a certain way, posing a certain way for people to talk about it.
Okay, so I'm beginning to think that you don't really understand how Twitter works, especially Stan Twitter. Something becomes a trending hashtag when enough people are talking about it and talking about it in a certain way, thus are able to make a hashtag within the community. It can be a pretty organic process, with a kind of cringy example that I saw on BTS Stan Twitter, which I think is relevant with hashtag Bighit close the gyms. Literally that hashtag came about not just because some pictures were released, which were released not by Bighit Entertainment or by BTS themselves, but a photo shoot, a third-party photo shoot, but rather this came about because ARMY had already been talking about BTS bulking up for months now. And I know this because I'm on BTS Stan Twitter. I see the tweets. I saw this building up for quite some time. People had been already talking about, since the online concert this past year, about how the BTS members had been getting bigger, and you could see it if you were paying attention to all of these different types of content. If you were looking at, like, you know, some of their interviews, or obviously their online concerts, or just random clips of their like reality TV show called In the Soup, which is very cute. I highly recommend it if you just want to see, you know, talented, handsome boys just out in the wilderness bonding. It's very fun. People also were seeing it in their other reality TV show, which is a variety show where they like play games and stuff. So ARMY is just talking about this amongst ourselves. You know, it's not like Big Hit Entertainment is like, hey, so here's a picture of us shirtless with muscles. Let's debut all of them. No, like, it's literally ARMY organically creating a conversation just based on observations that they're making over things that honestly are not obvious changes to their body. Like, this happens over a period of time, hence why this is a months-long conversation and not just a conversation that happens because some photos will drop, right? So when this conversation is happening, you know, it builds, and there's like little pictures here and there, some GIF sets going around on Twitter, and then what sets it off into high gear, because you already have this momentum building, you have a catalyst event, which was, as I already mentioned, those interview photos. That was the tipping point for the conversation to be not just happening, but happening at such a large volume and with such a big, loud voices talking about it. So then you get the hashtag Big Hit Close the Gyms, because it was a lot for people to take for some reason. Apparently, like, I guess ARMY was just getting thirsty and or scared of Big Hit doing these like behind the scenes workout regimens, and also just like BTS being behind the scenes and putting those videos out on their YouTube channel, and seeing all these pictures was just very overwhelming for ARMY, and thus we're like, hey, we can't take it anymore. We want you to close the gyms. Obviously, it's a joke. It is a joke. It is a joke. It's a joke. I just want people to know that. Sometimes, like, it's so weird to explain things that happen on Twitter. It doesn't even seem real, but it is real life. It did happen, and it was really funny. Like, it's not that big of a deal. It's kind of cringy, but it is something that organically happened. You know, it's not something that BTS did themselves, you know? It wasn't something that Big Hit tried to like worm into our brains, because how would they have known that that's what we would talk about, for one thing? And two, like, then they're telling BTS then to like work out so that we'll notice it, so that we'll start a hashtag to tell them to close the gym. Like, I would, that is some like marketing logic in some kind of weird alternate universe that I would just not understand. Like, that's, you know, for me, it just kind of seems weird to chalk up all these hashtags that are starting within the community as being contrived, as being part of like marketed images based on what BTS decide to post, and then the connections that ARMY make. Like, it just seems kind of like an assumption to make, honestly, and it really doesn't make any sense regarding how these Twitter hashtags were even started in the first place, you know? Like, they're a pretty organic process, like I already described, and it's not like BTS and Big Hit need to be marketing anything at this point. BTS is already as big as it's ever been, and it will continue to get bigger. They don't need to be doing some kind of like sly marketing strategy to get people to talk about them. And just a question, how the hell is a hashtag about somebody's hair color change gonna like get people to listen to BTS? How's it gonna get more fans? How is it gonna keep fans already in the fandom? Like, I don't really understand this. Like, you're trying to pathologize natural happenings to make it seem a lot more nefarious and calculated than it really is. Like, I think you of all people, D'Angelo, should know that things that happen on Twitter can be just a wild, wild west on there, and random things go viral, random things can be a hashtag. So it's just kind of weird that you would have this kind of a thought process. Fans can just be talking about their feelings and having a good old time with the discourse, and then because there's a lot of ARMY on Twitter, they start a hashtag. It really doesn't need to be any more complicated than that, or any deeper than that. Also, I want to point out something that is kind of related to what he's saying, but not really. So a big reason why new fans become new fans of BTS has nothing to do with what they see on Twitter, really, or generally it doesn't have anything to do with what you see on Twitter. It really has to do with the appearances that BTS makes on mainstream media. If you look at the comments under BTS Carpool Karaoke or BTS Hide and Seek, BTS Flinch, whatever, you will see people that say that, oh my god, I'm a fan of BTS now because I saw them in this video and I want to learn more. And then you want to learn their names, and then before you know it, you're in Stan Twitter now and you're a hardcore ARMY. That's really where you're getting new fans of BTS. That's really where the marketing is in these interviews. But if you look at what the comments are saying about BTS in these interviews, they're not saying that they look, you know, like robotic or forced. They think they look cute and adorable and they have so much fun, and it's their personalities that what get people interested. And also there's definitely some people that will see their performances on these mainstream television shows, and that'll also get them interested in ARMY and being an ARMY and being a fan of their music. I'm saying all of this because a lot of why BTS is so great is because they feel authentic to people. They don't feel like they're trying so hard to be this perfect person, and they very much so seem like us. And that's obviously appealing to people. And, you know, I just would like BTS to be treated like the human beings and the artists that they are, and not some kind of like gimmick, you know, not some kind of way to sell music in this kind of soulless, capitalistic way. I want people to just see them as they are, and what you will see will make you really happy. Honestly, they're great people from what I can tell, and they're really fun. So I want to talk about why I wanted to make this video in the first place. I usually hear what Dr. Phil said about BTS's Jimin, levied at other K-pop idols, and obviously leveled at BTS, which I already explained within context is pretty weird. But I hardly ever hear that term used for other artists or groups, even when these groups are literally manufactured as far as their origin goes, like with Little Mix and One Direction. And even then, and I even saw an interview with Simon about, I think, One Direction, and even he said that, you know, oh, they're not manufactured, you know, but it was hard for me to find any information about any of these groups being labeled as manufactured because people just weren't saying it. I type in like K-pop idol manufactured and oh my god, there's so many results. So many results. So when you constantly associate these international Asian artists, a part of a music industry that I guess you don't really understand or really don't want to understand, with contrivance and a marketing strategy and by proxy inauthenticity, even when they may be just as involved with their music as other Western and often white artists, even when you have a group like BTS, who, as I've mentioned, have made very heart-wrenching and brutally honest music and has shown themselves to be perfectionists to the point that they will pass out of exhaustion for how hard they've been working themselves to put on a great concert for ARMY. In a documentary that they put them out themselves, they still get this label of being manufactured. They still don't really get the respect that they deserve as artists. People still treat them as if they are this phenomenon and they are not artists to be considered with respect. There seems to be a xenophobic and racist element at play here. I see so many articles and videos about the dark side of K-pop and how the music is created to have mass market appeal, and that these artists are just shells manufactured by the label to sell soulless pop music. As if American record labels don't have similar mindsets or use similar tactics, which I will say right now is often because of capitalism. It's as if the label of K-pop and them being Asian is stopping people from treating them seriously and as worthwhile artists. And you can definitely see this when the only song that people are going to take a chance on when it comes to BTS is the only song that they released entirely in English, which was Dynamite. And it did really well. It did so well. It's been on the Billboard Hot 100 for weeks now, and it debuted at #1, because of course it did. And people are still listening to it to this day, and listening to it so frequently that it's still on the Billboard Hot 100. Still, even during the Christmas time, and it was released in like August. People have been hearing about BTS since 2017. They've been in the Western media stratosphere for years now. And then this is the time when they release an English song that they're going to give them a chance, that they're going to transcend that language barrier, to at least try to get into the music that they make, and then hopefully like read the lyrics later on. Like, this is something that Bong Joon-ho talked about in his acceptance speech. Like, you would be widening so much of your net of like great art that you can consume if you just stepped over the 1-inch barrier of subtitles. Honestly, you are missing out a lot with different language music. There's so many wonderful stories being told and so much representation to be made in the West with expanding our conception of the kinds of people that we should take seriously in music. I will also link some other videos about this topic down below. They'll probably be by BB Gang, and I'm also going to link some articles about this too. I'm really glad that BTS, of all of them, have really been able to break the mold, but it's taken them so long to be taken seriously. And I honestly don't think that that's fair, nor do I think that racism and xenophobia isn't involved. There's no way that racism and xenophobia is not at work with regards to the respect that they don't get from the music industry. Like, I'm positive that that is a huge element of that. What the media is going to be showing you about like BTS and other K-pop idols is going to be misleading, because oftentimes it's going to be focusing on like the worst elements possible of the K-pop industry, which is often the product of, like I already mentioned, the 3 biggest labels in the industry. They will not only cover the worst elements, they'll also be really misleading and kind of racist in covering that, making it seem a lot more nefarious than what we do in the United States, even though it's very much so modeled over what is done in the United States music industry. Even if there are some entertainment labels that aren't that great, and there definitely are entertainment labels that are not good. SM being the worst. The worst. This doesn't mean though that the idols within that entertainment industry don't ever contribute to the music or the choreography, or that they aren't ever treated well. Like, I want that to be made clear too. Like, that's also something the media doesn't want to do, is give nuance. And even if they didn't fully participate in the creation of their music and of the choreography, that doesn't mean that they aren't still artists, you know? It still takes talent to sing songs and to perform and to dance choreography with emotion and passion. You don't really have to sing your own songs in order to sing a song well and full of emotion and understanding. You can still show artistry even if you aren't dancing the choreography that you yourself choreograph. A lot of what comes with the narrative that K-pop artists are a part of this industry that's just manufacturing music for the sake of it, or really for the sake of money, that the music can't be good, or that somehow the fun music that they're trying to make isn't worthy of anything. And I don't really think that's true, you know? Like, there's nothing wrong with creating music that's just fun and great, you know? And there's nothing wrong with performing songs that you yourself didn't write. That doesn't necessarily make you any less of an artist. Like, there are plenty of artists that have not always written their own songs. Kesha didn't always write every single one of her songs. And same thing with Beyonce and Katy Perry. Elvis Presley didn't always write his own songs. So I think it's very possible to still call people who don't perform their own music artists. We still call Beyonce and Katy Perry and Elvis Presley artists. You know, I don't really think their lack of writing credit should preclude you from doing that. And this isn't even remotely scratching the surface of all the things that I've even mentioned in this video. There's so many different trends that have a much deeper history and deserve a much longer video than this to get into. I'm just mentioning that just so I can cover my bases here, because obviously there's a whole wider context of why the fans gave such a negative reaction to what Dr. Phil said, and also obviously D'Angelo's video. But I can't get into like all of the wider context because in this video it will be like 2 hours long. But I can at least give you a little bit of a taste of why, you know, this video isn't just about me reacting to the comments that D'Angelo made directly in it. It is about breaking down like why what some of D'Angelo said is not only problematic, but is also playing into a lot of these narratives that I constantly see being pushed that are part of a wider history of othering Asian people, and obviously in this case would be Koreans in particular. So I needed to mention all of that just so that y'all know, like, this is a video about K-pop, but it's also a wider video about just the othering of K-pop idols and their music, and this really weird juxtaposition between having people trivializing their music and making it seem like it doesn't really matter, but then also being so serious regarding the K-pop industry and all of its harmful practices. It's just so bizarre to me. So all in all, these stereotypes and negative pieces on K-pop are coming from this place of xenophobia and very much so preferring the West and making it seem like Korea is uniquely bad for a lot of the practices that we do in the West, and we're very much so inspiration for the industry currently in Korea. So some final thoughts. I know that D'Angelo did not make this video maliciously, but it did inadvertently play into a lot of these negative tropes about K-pop and K-pop artists and perpetuated them. He treated Dr. Phil's claim as if it were in a vacuum, and it's not. He took what Dr. Phil said as a given, and it's not. He didn't even bother to treat the counterpoints to what Dr. Phil said seriously. I already mentioned that, but that really bothered me. You know, people are not saying these things with ideas out of thin air. Like, where do you think people are getting this idea, if not from research that they've done on their own, within discourse that people have had within the fandom? He assumed that the comments in the only article he read, by the way, like these were just the only tweets he wanted to look up, because he really didn't put that much thought in this video. He assumed the comments that agreed with his point of view were right. He didn't even seek out like other commentary about this. He just took all of what was posted in that all K-pop article, which is not like the bastion of journalism, to be all the different thoughts and explanations about this issue, and it's like not. FYI, I still like D'Angelo Wallace. I just think maybe he stopped covering things that he doesn't really know a lot about, like K-pop, because he doesn't fully understand the extent of how big this subject is when he covers it, and he doesn't seem to be that willing to do his research on this topic. I think if you're going to be talking about something, you should probably do your research on it, even though you may know a lot about that topic. I don't think you should just assume that you know all there is to know about it. And it's fine to like do, you know, some pithy videos about stuff. Like, it's okay. Regardless, I do think it's important to do your research and at least get a good idea of what you're covering, and not assume that all of the narratives that you see from just one article are the complete totality of what the conversation has within it. So yeah, that was a lot. Apologies, I didn't mean to be like taking so long with talking about this video, but I had a lot of thoughts and I had a lot of opinions, and I hope you learned something, especially if like you aren't a part of the K-pop community. I hope this is a good kind of like introduction from somebody who is part of the K-pop community, who is a fan of BTS, and who is also a leftist. So we exist. We're people just like you. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it. Feel free to like comment down in the comments, and I will see you later. Bye.